Anyone has a potential to be a monster. At least that's what the Milgram Experiment in psychology demonstrated in 1961. Once upon a time, before music and perfumery came into my life, I was studying in psychology at the University of McGill, and we learned about this experiment. And of course, as a psychology major, learning about this experiment was extremely disturbing. It actually haunted me part of my life. And the aim of this historic experiment was to investigate the willingness of ordinary people like you and me to inflict harm onto innocent people, even if it went against their ethics and moral values. And if you've never heard about this experiment, here's how it worked. And the experiment involved 3 people. The first one was the actual experimenter, who's up here in blue. The second one was the teacher, who is here in purple and beige. And the last one is the learner in green. But here's the tricky part. The actual person who is the subject of the experiment is the one who is named the teacher, right here. The one in green is actually an actor, and so is the experimenter. So the person who's actually being studied is the teacher, but that person didn't know. So keep in mind that the person here in beige is a volunteer who doesn't know that they're actually the subject of the test. And the person's role here in beige was to ask questions to the learner, the person here in green, and every time the person in green answered wrong, the person in beige was to administer an electric shock to the learner. And again, the learner was an actor, and the role of the person in blue was to encourage the person in beige to continue administering these shocks, which were going all the way up to 450 volts. Keep in mind that starting between 100 and 350, you can actually induce cardiac arrest, and at 450, the person's dead. Another important detail is that there were actually no shocks ever occurring, so the person in L would never actually get any shocks and was just acting. Of course, the person in beige had no knowledge of this. What they did know was that at certain levels, they were potentially risking the life of the person in L. And the job of the person in blue was to continue to encourage the person in beige whenever they would have a hesitation using authoritative figure. This person in blue was wearing a white lab coat for this experiment. And of course, this whole experiment precipitated important discussions on rules and ethics in psychology. But nevertheless, there were some important takeaways from this historic experiment. And this experiment has been repeated many times in different contexts with pretty much the same results. And the results are that pretty much 100% of subjects are able to go all the way to the point of 300 volts. So knowingly harming somebody in the right context. And here's a scary part. 65% of people are willing to go to the 450 volts, knowingly killing someone. The experiment would stop if the subject would completely resist, which happened extremely rarely, or when the person had administered 3 times 450 volts, something that no one would survive. So again, this experiment prompted many reforms in ethics and psychology, because think about it, these people had to live with the knowledge of them potentially being able to harm someone to that degree, right? But that being said, it's extremely revealing on how we are influenced by figures of authority. And I'm sorry if the details of this experiment can be disturbing for some of you, but I think we can use this as an opportunity of empowerment. I'm trying to say this without bawling, but if we want the world to be a better place and a kinder place, we have to start being part of the 35% of people who resist authority when it's telling us to harm others. We have to learn to dig deep inside and connect with what we know is good and right, and not just do things because someone else is telling us what to do. I often wonder what would happen if war was declared and no one showed up because everyone just knew better.